So Bernie Sanders appeared on Face the Nation, a news show hosted by somebody by the name of Margaret, and she is on CBS. This is a CBS show, and as you guys know, all of these different outlets are all actually just they're owned by very few conglomerates. I think it's like 90% of media outlets or news outlets are controlled by like six ginormous companies, and so as Bernie Sanders broke down on the Joe Rogan podcast, basically health insurance companies as well as big pharma, pharmaceutical companies are all running advertisements against Bernie Sanders, and so they're going to kind of have on hosts who they're either going to hire hosts who they know will not ask legit questions, or they will just straight up instruct them to ask ridiculous questions. Here's an example of a ridiculous question.
You're advocating for the empowerment of the U.S. government to take over the entire healthcare system. This just optically looks like the party can't run its own caucus.
Margaret, that's not a true statement. I'm not advocating for the United States government to take over the healthcare system. What I am advocating for is an expansion of Medicare. Medicare exists.
Right.
I want to expand it over a 4-year period.
Which would be administered by the U.S. government. And
precisely, just as Medicare is right now. But it's not a takeover. People will still go to the same doctor. They'll go to the same hospital. We will substantially lower the cost of prescription drugs. The cost per person will go down.
And so this is a very common right-wing talking point from what looks to be like Fox News hosts and folks like that, is that, this is a full-on government takeover of healthcare. Now, one thing that I find very odd is the idea that, having a ton of different private insurance companies working against each other in this big old clusterfuck. When it comes to healthcare, right? Healthcare is not the same as buying a telephone. It's not the same thing as buying a television, right? These are all things that are commodities, but those are very different from something like healthcare. You can't really negotiate with healthcare. If you're dying, you need help. And so there's no real negotiation process there's an ability to. And so that's why that sort of a commodity is different from a television or a phone or something like that. And so the idea that this big, cluster of a system is going to work better than a government, full run, because that's what it is. It's called single-payer healthcare, right? One way to pay for it, all right? Fully publicly funded. That's the smart way to do it. We have one, negotiator on our behalf, and that cuts down administrative costs. It'll make things easier for doctors, all of that good stuff. So the problem here is it's not a government takeover of healthcare. It's a government takeover of health insurance, all right? So the government gives everyone this Medicare card, this insurance card, and yeah, they're running Medicare, which is a good thing. We want them to run Medicare, all right? That's what we want. But it's not like the government is employing these doctors. It's not like the government is running these hospitals. These are all privately administered care. Right? All of this, the hospitals are going to stay private, the doctors are going to stay private, all of that stuff, all right? And so it's like the Canadian system, not like the UK system. The UK system is what would be a government takeover because they actually control the hospitals and all that stuff. I don't know if they contract with companies to basically run the hospitals, but they actually have a hand in essentially controlling that. And honestly, there's an argument to be made that system is even better than this one. And we can have that discussion if you want, but that's a totally different thing. So this is a takeover of the insurance system, which is what we want because we need to get private health insurance and obviously big pharma out of the picture. And so to frame it as a healthcare takeover is bullshit because the doctors are still going to be employed at their hospitals. It's just that the payment that they're going to be getting from insurance is going to be solely from Medicare. And then we have more control. And, forget if it was Bill Gates or Warren Buffett who was like, yeah, the best way to bring costs down is to have one big system. It's pretty obvious stuff. You don't have price gouging. You have more control. And then also, if you have everyone on one system, there's a ton of young people who will subsidize the old people because old people consume it more than young people do. And so the young will subsidize the old. That's how insurance works, by the way. In any insurance pool, that's how it works. People who are not using the insurance are subsidizing the folks who have insurance who are going to use it. So in car insurance, right? People who get in accidents and get in accidents a lot are being covered by people who don't. That's how insurance works. That's how the circle keeps going. So when you have all these different pools of people, then it ruins that entire plan, especially when the Republican Party is... can't believe they were arguing for high-risk pools. It's pretty insane, because that's the dumbest thing ever. But once again, mainstream media asking some pretty faulty questions, and you know that she's getting these questions fed from her uppers, her overlords. It's very obvious.